Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Gary Metro, and I'm the editor of the Southern Illinoisan. I want to thank you all for that fantastic round of applause that you had for me. It's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to this wonderful event for the 12th Congressional District Debate Series. This is quite a turnout, isn't it? I'd say rumors of democracy and decline are greatly exaggerated. The Southern Illinoisan is proud to sponsor this debate in Marion. We also appreciate and recognize our partners in presenting the debate, WSIU TV, the Belleville News Democrat, and the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. This gathering is part of our fabric of society as a free and self-governing people. The debate continues a political tradition that's long been part of American politics and of special significance in the state of Illinois. In 1858, our about-to-be president, Abraham Lincoln, participated in a series of debates against Stephen A. Douglas. So this debate continues a grand tradition. The Southern Illinoisan and our partners welcome the candidates for Congress: Paula Bradshaw of the Green Party, William Enyart of the Democratic Party, and Jason Plummer of the Republican Party. Candidates, may you all have great success tonight in explaining your vision for the 12th District. Let's hear it for all the candidates, and no booing. Tonight's debate will feature the candidates asking questions posed by three members of the news media. There will be a rebuttal session about halfway through, and we will ask some of the questions from the audience before closing for the night. The debate will close at 8:30 p.m. At this time, I'd like to excuse myself from the microphone, take a seat with the journalists who will be asking questions, and taking over as the moderator of the program is Jack Tishner of WSIU TV. Let's give him a nice hand, please.
Couple of housekeeping notes before we get underway. Please turn off all cell phones, no flash photography, no noisemakers. You may applaud briefly after your candidates' responses, but keep in mind that time will take away from the time the candidates in general will have to respond to the questions. Please keep it civil and keep it clean. If not, the police will escort you from the premises, and we don't want that happening. So thanks very much for being here this evening. We certainly appreciate it, and we'll get underway shortly. Good evening and welcome to the second of three formal debates by the three candidates running for Congress in Illinois' 12th U.S. House District. The candidates are Paula Bradshaw of the Green Party from Carbondale, Bill Enyart, Democrat from Belleville, and Jason Plummer, Republican candidate from O'Fallon. The candidates will be questioned by Gary Metro of the Southern Illinois newspaper, Jennifer Fuller of WSIU Radio, and Beth Hunsdorfer of the Belleville News Democrat. I'm Jack Titchener of WSIU Public Television. I'll be your moderator for tonight. We'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement from each of our candidates, the order of which was determined by a drawing by the candidates before the debate. Paula Bradshaw will have the first opening statement.
Hello. Our country is under siege. Our industrial cities look like they've been bombed, complete with shell-shocked refugees wandering outside crumbling factories. Many of our beautiful Appalachian mountains have been blown up, destroying forests, homes, and streams. Millions of people have had armed men kick them out of their foreclosed homes. Meanwhile, drought, wildfires, floods, and tornadoes cause widespread damage to homes, farms, and businesses. Millions are jobless, hungry, without health care. We seem to be under attack, yet our trillion-dollar military can't protect us. In the last debate, I pointed out that FDR put 4 million people to work in 2 months in 1933, the equivalent of 10 million people today. But that was nothing compared to the mobilization of World War II, when the entire economy was changed from civilian to military production and almost everyone was employed. Today, we need a different kind of mobilization, but on the same scale. We need to put everyone to work, producing the weapons to fight global warming, the end of cheap oil, and a crumbling infrastructure. We've known since the Arab oil embargo of 1973 that we need to cure our addiction to fossil fuels. I sometimes procrastinate too, but 40 years? If we could produce 229,600 planes between 1942 and 1944, we can certainly produce and install enough renewable energy to supply our country's needs within the next few years. We can certainly rebuild our light rail, insulate buildings, plant buffer zones to protect our rivers and streams, provide health, education, and social services for our population, and create the means for small farms and businesses to prosper. Don't believe it for 1 minute when they say we can't afford it. When Wall Street wanted a bailout, Congress and the Fed bailed them out with trillions of dollars in debt-created money. While working people struggle to get by, more than 90% of new income created in the last... Oh, really?
Yes.
I thought it was...
Thank you. Next opening statement from Bill Enyart.
I had more.
I'd like to thank Mayor and Mayor Robert Butler for hosting this event. I'd also like to take a few moments to tell you a bit about me. I've lived and raised my family and paid taxes in the district for more than 40 years. I'm the son of a factory worker and spent 35 years in uniform protecting our great nation in the state of Illinois. I could never have attended college without the GI Bill and student loans. Now, there are serious policy differences between my opponents and me. I hope the questions in this debate highlight three. 1, tax fairness. I'll vote to end the Bush millionaire tax cuts for people making more than $250,000 a year. Mr. Plummer will vote to increase millionaires' tax breaks. Mr. Plummer refuses to tell you what percentage of his income he paid in taxes last year or any year. I immediately released my tax returns, going back to when Mr. Plummer was in high school. Second, Medicare's guarantee. Mr. Plummer endorsed the Paul Ryan budget, which turns it into a voucher program. He also, third, jobs. I have a clear, achievable jobs plan, which you can look at on my website. Mr. Plummer has a 12-point plan, which he's yet to fully release. It apparently endorses continued corporate welfare and ending regulations. We all know what happened when big banks' regulations were eased. You will make the determination which of us has a better plan to make it better for working people in Southern Illinois. We don't know where the nation will be next week or next year. We don't know what serious decisions will need to be made by our congressmen. So it's important for you to know who we are and how we make decisions. It's important for you to consider which of the candidates has proven experience, proven leadership, proven integrity. There are three drastically different visions, one clear choice.
Mr. Plummer.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. I'd like to thank the media organizations and other groups that helped put this event on. You know, I've been crisscrossing this district for months now, meeting with voters in every county, meeting with voters from a variety of backgrounds, talking about the issues that matter to them. The voters of Southern Illinois are anxious. People are frustrated. People are scared. If you look at what's happening in Southern Illinois right now, people don't feel that what's happening in Washington, what's happening in Springfield is addressing the needs that matter to them. Southern Illinois is an area tremendously blessed with resources. We have coal, we have oil, we have gas, we have Scott Air Force Base, we have SIU Carbondale. We're in a wonderful geographic location. We have all the natural resources, a great geographic location, and all the human resources I think anybody could ever ask for. Unfortunately, we're hurting. This congressional district has a 10.5% unemployment rate. My opponent here, Mr. Enyart, who seems fascinated by me, doesn't understand that people are hurting. He says things are getting better in Southern Illinois under President Obama. Every county in this district for the last 4 months has seen its unemployment rate go up. The state of Illinois today saw its unemployment rate go from 8.7% to 9.1%. Illinois has the highest foreclosure rate in the nation. We just saw in Franklin County another company shutting down, 360 more jobs. We see Pat Quinn, the governor of the state, a strong ally of my opponent, Mr. Enyart, shutting down the state facilities of Southern Illinois so he can transfer those jobs to Cook County. We need an elected official that's going to stand up for all of Southern Illinois, that's going to stand up for the entire congressional district, that's going to represent the policies and the plans we need to put people back to work. I'm proud to have laid out a jobs plan that talks about these issues. We don't talk about tax credits for companies and tax credits for individuals. We talk about real solutions for the real problems we're facing because the people of Southern Illinois thirst for answers, and we're delivering them.
Okay, thanks, candidates. It's time now for questions from our panelists. Each candidate will have 2 minutes each to answer the question. The first question is from Gary Metro of the Southern Illinoisan for candidate Paula Bradshaw.
This question was suggested by Ken Whittington of Benton, who is a reader of the Southern Illinoisan. We are going to hear a lot about taxation throughout the campaign season, including the reasons for and against continuing the so-called Bush tax cuts for the wealthy. Perhaps you have a greater level of financial expertise than me, but I can't understand how my middle-income lifestyle will be improved if wealthier Americans start paying higher taxes. Would higher taxes on the wealthy benefit the middle class? Why or why not?
Ms. Bradshaw.
Wow, talk about class divisions there. Yes, asking the rich to pay their fair share would definitely help the middle class because the middle class right now is paying more of their fair share because the rich aren't paying theirs. I mean, I guess I do understand better than Mr. Whittington about finances, but if you've got people making millions of dollars a year and they're paying 13%, and you've got people making $40,000 a year and they're paying 35%, clearly something's off there. And it can only be better by getting rid of not only the Bush tax cuts, but the Reagan tax cuts, because that's the last 30 years of tax cuts for the rich and attacking the working people, the unionized people, and other people of this country has not made for a better country. It's made for a much worse country. Oh, I still have more time. Well, I'll finish this.
You still have time. All right. Mr. Enyart.
Thank you. You know, here we have a clear policy difference between Mr. Plummer and myself. I believe, and in fact, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff recently said that the greatest threat to America is not military, it's the deficit. Now, why do we have a deficit? We have a deficit because of the Bush millionaire tax cuts, because they're not paying their fair share of taxes. The tax rate paid by Mitt Romney is 14%. You know, Warren Buffett said it better than I can when he said it's not fair that my secretary pays a higher tax rate than I do. Now, I don't care how much Mr. Plummer made. What I care is how much he paid. You know, if Mitt Romney paid 14%, I think that Mr. Plummer wants to go to Congress and he wants to write tax policy. Don't you think that it's fair that he disclose what his tax returns are? After all, Senator Brady, his running mate in his failed bid to become lieutenant governor, released his tax returns, and Senator Brady didn't even pay any federal income tax in 2 years. So what is it that Mr. Plummer hasn't paid?
Mr. Plummer.
Well, I'll actually answer the question. You know, if you look at what's happening right now in the United States, If you look at what's happening in the United States right now, you have politicians of both parties that aren't being honest with the voters. The Bush tax cuts could also be called the Obama tax cuts, since President Obama also supported their extension. And what we have right now is we have a tax code that's more than 72,000 pages. And it grows every year. And it doesn't grow because it's getting better. It grows because connected individuals, connected businesses, can figure out a way to create loopholes and deductions. The United States Constitution is less than 10 pages, the foundation of our government and our society, yet we have a tax code north of 72,000 pages. What we need is true tax reform. I've laid out a plan for true tax reform to lower the rates that individuals and businesses throughout the United States pay, to eliminate the vast majority of loopholes and deductions that companies like General Electric and individuals like Warren Buffett take advantage of, while folks in this audience, folks on this stage, bear the brunt of the costs. What we need is true tax reform, and we need serious politicians who are going to go to Washington, D.C. and talk about that. Regards to tax cuts for millionaires, I don't know how it could be called a tax cut for a millionaire if they're making $250,000, but we all know that pass-through entities like sub-S-corps and LLCs are the vast majority of small businesses in the United States. And when someone has a small business that makes some money, they pay that business's taxes on their personal returns. So if you want to tax 80% of the small businesses in the United States, the engine of job creation in the United States, that's fine. I just think taxing small businesses, putting people out of work, isn't going to solve the deficit or the financial crisis we're facing right now. We're not facing a deficit because we don't pay enough in taxes. We're facing a deficit because friends of yours like Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi don't know how to stop spending money.
Our next question is from Jennifer Fuller for Bill Enyart.
Mr. Enyart, there's also a question of what actually constitutes the middle class. How would you define the middle class based on yearly household income? And what makes you the best qualified candidate in this race to represent their interests as well as the rest of the economic spectrum?
Thank you. I think probably the best place to start with middle income would be in the middle, and that's about $50,000 a year. And then you can adjust it either side of that, but I think that's probably a pretty good starting point. Now, you can get into statistical analysis, but let's just say that 50 would be the mid-range, all right? Now, I think that I would be the best person to represent this district because I started out life like most people in this district. I'm from a working class family. My dad worked in a factory. My mom was a clerk in what was called then a dime store. Today it'd be called a dollar store. I enlisted in the Air Force at 19. I only got to go to college because of the GI Bill and because of student loans, and that's how I got through law school. I think that my experience in working, and Mitt Romney the other day chastised the 47% of the people who don't pay income tax. You know what? I had to draw unemployment. I've been laid off. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be one of those 350 families without a job. Now, I was lucky. I had the GI Bill, and I worked hard, and I made some money, and I became successful. I got promoted through the Guard to Brigadier General and wound up retiring as a two-star general. Promoted by a Republican president, selected to be the commander of the Illinois National Guard by a Democratic governor, and then promoted to a second star by a Republican president. So, by hard work and GI Bill and student loans, government programs, I got to where I am today. So I think I understand what it's like to work through these problems.
Response from Jason Plummer.
Well, I think I'm the best person to represent the interests of those folks and everybody else in the 12th Congressional District because I'm willing to admit there's a problem. There's a serious problem. The unemployment rate in this district is double digits. People can't find work. Some folks on this stage think things are getting better, and I said before, things are getting worse. What's really frightening is if you look at our numbers and realize that over the last 4 months, every county has seen its unemployment rate go up. if you see the businesses that are shutting down, these people don't care if you're a Republican, they don't care if you're a Democrat, they don't care where you're from. They want to know if you're going to talk about the issues that matter to them. And that's why we've been crisscrossing this district, doing town halls, meeting with farmers, meeting with coal miners and doctors and teachers and nurses, talking about the issues that impact them, talking about what the federal government's doing right now to keep them from reaching the goals that they want to reach, keeping them from providing for their families in the way they'd like to. We need people that are going to push the correct policies. We don't need class warfare. We don't need divisiveness. We don't need partisanship. What we need are leaders. Leaders that are going to go out there and talk about the real issues. So when I meet with these folks and we take their ideas and we take their issues and we take their experiences and we put them into a job plan that talks about the failed policies of President Obama, talks about the failed policies of Nancy Pelosi, and talks about how we can fix those policies in a bipartisan manner like a lot of folks in Washington are trying to do. You know, Jerry Costello and John Shimkus, one was a Republican and one was a Democrat, but they worked together for Southern Illinois. They didn't say nasty things about each other. They didn't worry about how the other lived his life. They made sure they were representing Southern Illinois. I'm in this race to represent those coal miners. I'm in this race to represent the manufacturing facilities, the transportation companies, the doctors, the nurses, the teachers that can't find work, that see their children graduate school and have to move out of the area because they can't find jobs. Things aren't getting better, Bill. Things are getting worse, and we need leaders that are going to admit it and fix it.
Our next question is from Beth Hunsdorfer for Jason Plummer.
Mr. Plummer, if President Obama wins a second term,
I don't get to answer that question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Paula, my apologies. My bad.
Well, you know, Mitt Romney, a lot of people made fun of him because when they asked him what the middle class was, he said anyone making $250,000 a year. But if you look at and to the rest of us who make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, that seemed ridiculous that he would think like that. But if you realize how very, very rich the top 1% are, then it doesn't seem so weird. For instance, the average hedge fund manager, the top 10 hedge fund managers in 2010 made $72,000 an hour. $72,000 an hour, whereas minimum wage is $8.25 an hour. You can see that $50,000 a year is not in the middle of $72,000 and $8.25 an hour. Obviously, we aren't going to bring back this so-called middle class, which, of course, most of us define as a middle income, as an income that makes it possible for you to raise a family and have a house and take vacations and have a decent lifestyle. And that's all most Americans want. We're not greedy. We don't have this insatiable desire for more that the 1% seem to have, you know, where they're already rich beyond all belief, and now they want to cut food stamps, and now they want more tax cuts. How greedy can you get? Most of us aren't like that. And starting in 1980, when Reagan not only first cut taxes on the wealthy, but also started attacking the unions, the people who didn't have a college education but had good union jobs, he came into office and started attacking them right then. And the 80s were the first time I ever saw homeless people on the streets of the United States. Now they want to cut food stamps. Are we soon going to see starving people on the streets of the United States so the 1% can be even richer? No. The Green New Deal will give everybody a living wage and a decent income.
And now we're back on track. The next question is from Beth Hunsdorfer for Jason Plummer.
Mr. Plummer, if President Obama wins a second term, he has said that he plans to take on immigration reform. In June, he announced that his administration would allow children of illegal immigrants, sometimes referred to as dream kids, to stay in the country legally. Do you support the DREAM Act? And beyond that, what kinds of immigration reform do you support? Should there be a pathway to citizenship for undocumented workers currently in the United States?
Thank you. You know, everybody in this room is probably a descendant of an immigrant that came here at some point in time. That's one thing that makes America great, is the opportunity, the beacon of hope that it is for people around the world. We have a lot of people that come to America all the time. I get frustrated when I see people that want to run down America. My response is always, if America is so bad, if things are so bad here right now, why do so many people want to come here? People want to come here because there's opportunity. A lot of folks are here legally, a lot of folks are here illegally, and that's something that needs to be addressed. I would not have supported the DREAM Act. I think we need to provide a pathway for citizenship for people that have done a lot of good things. Unfortunately, if you look at the way that plan is currently structured, there's very little accountability. We know that there's national security threats, and we have to remain vigilant on our borders. We've got to make sure that folks that come here legally are not being jumped in front of by other folks that come here illegally. We've got to make sure that American citizens have the opportunity for jobs, and we have to be really honest about the costs in education and health care that the illegal immigrant population causes to regular American taxpayers to carry. What we need is a real immigration policy, not one that provides amnesty. We need one that provides opportunity. We need to make sure that folks that want to come here and offer good ideas and offer opportunity to this nation are allowed to come here. But we also need to make sure that we know who's here and we know why they're here. We need secure borders, and we need to make sure that we provide a pathway to citizenship for people that are here for the right reasons.
Paula Bradshaw.
Yeah, why do people come to the United States anyhow? I think it's because of the infrastructure that we have set up, where most everybody has running water. You know, billions of people on this planet, when they want water, they got to take a bucket down to the river. But because of our government spending on infrastructure, we have a very pleasant living condition in the United States. Hot and cold running water, sewer systems, transportation. We have it good here, and a lot of people want to come. Now, I'm kind of into, stable population, so I wouldn't say we should just throw open the borders. But part of the other thing that drives people to come here would be desperate conditions in their home countries. For instance, NAFTA. Before NAFTA passed in 1994, or when it started, there were 4 million illegal Mexicans, or people born in Mexico here. After NAFTA, by 2007, there was 12 million. They went from 4,000 to 12 million. Don't tell me they're coming here because of some dream of freedom. They're coming here because NAFTA destroyed jobs not only in the United States but also in Mexico. And dumping cheap corn on Mexico threw thousands of peasants off of their land, and out of desperation they came here. So, I kind of think if they're already here and they have kids here, well then yes, they should become citizens. But the other thing I would like to say is I'm against allowing any more disposed dictators and death squad leaders coming to this country. For instance, last week, Obama refused to extradite an ex-dictator of Bolivia who's wanted by the Bolivian people because of how many Bolivians he killed, and Obama refused to extradite him. And there was an ex-Mexican president who killed a bunch of his own people in the 90s, and he is now living here, like so many other dictators, and they're refusing to let him be tried and prosecuted for his crimes either.
Bill Enyart.
Thank you. About 3 years ago, when I was serving as the commander of the Illinois National Guard, Senator Durbin contacted me, and Senator Durbin had introduced the DREAM Act. And Senator Durbin asked me if I would endorse the DREAM Act for him. And I said, well, Senator, I don't know. Let me take a look at it and see what it says. And one of the provisions in the DREAM Act is that if someone enters the military service, takes that oath to defend our country, to defend our Constitution, then that person gets an expedited route to citizenship. And I thought about that, and I thought, if someone is willing to take that oath, and someone is willing to defend our country, someone is willing to put their life on the line for our freedoms and our Constitution, it's wrong to deny them citizenship. So I wrote a letter endorsing the DREAM Act at Senator Durbin's request because of that. I thought it was the right thing to do. And since I've been campaigning, I've had occasion to meet with orchard owners and farmers here in Southern Illinois. And those orchard owners have told me we can't produce food without migrant workers. And I've also discovered that most of those migrant workers are legal. You know, they have agricultural visas. There's a special visa that permits those people to come into our country and work as agricultural workers, and they do that. And I think that's appropriate. If they're willing to come up here and they have proper papers and they're willing to work and pay taxes and pay in to the Social Security tax fund and pay income taxes, I see no reason why they shouldn't be allowed to legally work.
Thank you. Next question from the panel comes from Gary Metro for Bill Enyart.
This question comes from Angelo Hightower of Marion, who reads the Southern Illinoisan and may be in the audience. Given the partisan gridlock in Washington, what specifically would you do as a member of Congress to reach across the aisle? What issues are the most likely for statesmanship and compromise? And are there any specific issues that you would refuse to compromise?
Thank you, Gary. You know, part of my job as the Adjutant General, as the Commanding General of the Guard, was to work across the aisle. I had to deal every day with legislators, Republicans, Democrats, state legislators, federal legislators. I was called to testify. And I found that I could work with both parties. I found that when you have to build a new armory, it wasn't a Republican armory or a Democratic armory, and in fact, I didn't even look to see if when we built that new armory in Carbondale, or when we built that new fire station in Sparta, or the new armory in Mount Vernon, I didn't even look to see whether it was a Democratic state legislator or a Republican, or a Democratic federal legislator or a Republican. I analyzed the situation to determine where it needed to be done and did the right thing. And I think that that can happen. I think that by working together, by being civil, and you know, you haven't seen any attack ads run by me. You haven't seen Bill Enyart endorsing attack ads. There have been attack ads run in this campaign, but they haven't been endorsed by Bill Enyart. And I think that bipartisanship is called for, and I think it can be accomplished. And I will work to do that.
Mr. Plummer.
Absolutely. You know, what I said in my opening statements was true. The voters of Southern Illinois that are hurting right now, they don't care if you're a Republican, they don't care if you're a Democrat, they care if you're talking about the solutions that matter to them. That's why we're talking about those issues. We're talking about, for instance, the Farm Bill right now. The Farm Bill is held up in Washington, D.C. because of Democrats and Republicans. Our farmers are struggling through one of the worst seasons they've ever seen. I announced this week that if I was in Congress right now, I'd call for a discharge petition against the Republican leadership because our farmers need a farm bill, and they need a farm bill now. There's some very serious policy issues out there right now. And what you see about my campaign is I don't look at policy issues through a Republican lens or Democrat lens. I look through it at a lens as, is this right for Southern Illinois? And I can tell you there's a lot of issues that aren't right for Southern Illinois. Obamacare is bad for Southern Illinois. Cap and trade is bad for Southern Illinois. The DREAM Act is bad for Southern Illinois. I won't stand up for those issues if they're pushed by a Republican or a Democrat. The fact that the Farm Bill isn't happening right now is bad for Southern Illinois. I'm standing up to the Republican Party right now. I wish Bill would stand up to his party on issues like Obamacare that slashes $720 billion from Medicare. That's money that our seniors demand.
Let him finish.
$720 billion that our seniors are depending on right now. We need to make sure that we put policies in place that benefit Southern Illinois. 20 years ago, this district had 37 operating coal mines. Today, we have fewer than 10. We already saw this administration try to push cap and trade, and when it failed legislatively, they decided they wanted to implement it through regulatory fiat. I've stood up from the very beginning and said we need to stop that. We need those coal mines. We need those jobs. We need the opportunity that offers Southern Illinois. I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat. I'm not going to Washington, D.C. to represent a party. I'm going to Washington, D.C. to represent all 12 counties of the 12th Congressional District.
Paula Bradshaw.
Well, we hear a lot of talk about compromise, and I kind of wonder why we hear so much talk about compromise when we don't see any in the Congress right now. And I think that that's a code word for capitulation, actually. What we see with the Farm Bill right now seems to be that they're holding it up as long as possible so that the legislators desperate to get a Farm Bill passed will throw millions of people off of food stamps, which would be a horrible thing. And I may be wrong about that, but I just saw it last year with the whole debt ceiling thing where they just ran it right up till the end of the clock and then started talking about cutting Social Security and Medicare. So I think that this whole refusal to compromise seems to be a way to make more reasonable people capitulate to unreasonable demands, and I think it's wrong. As far as cooperating on armories and war, well, Democrats and Republicans are always gung-ho for war, it seems to me. You name a country someone wants to bomb, doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican president, the Congress will go for it every time. Not to mention the attacks on our civil liberties, the Patriot Act, the NDAA, passed with Democrat and Republicans. Why? That sort of thing, if you're talking about upholding the Constitution, that should be a no-brainer. You don't attack the Constitution. You don't pass bills that totally eviscerate not just the Bill of Rights, but the habeas corpus rights we've had since the Magna Carta. I'm sorry, but I'm not impressed with the Democrats or the Republicans. I think it's time we got a green in the House.
Our next question is from Jennifer Fuller for Jason Plummer.
Mr. Plummer, let's talk about military spending. Our human costs are beyond computation, from military campaigns in Afghanistan and Iraq, not to say anything about the recent killings in Libya. There is also a steep financial burden linked to our peacekeeping and regime-changing missions, a burden that could be increased substantially through hostilities in Syria and Libya and the possibility of conflict between Iran and Israel. So the question is, are we spending too much on our military? Can we afford to spend less? And what changes in military spending would you support?
We live in a very dangerous world, as the recent events remind everyone. My thoughts and prayers are with the families of the Americans that were killed in Libya over the last few days. We're facing problems across the world right now. It's not just the Middle East. You see Russia on the rise. You see China expanding its territorial reach. We need a strong military. Everything I do when I go to Washington, D.C. will be focused on just a couple simple questions. Is it right for the voters of the 12th Congressional District? And is it a core function of government? I think the number one core function of government is national defense. I know Scott Air Force Base up in St. Clair County is very important in national defense. It plays a phenomenal role that most people don't realize. It's important to the local economy, but the impact it has on our national defense cannot be understated. My Navy unit's actually based at Scott Air Force Base, and I know exactly what happens there. We need to make sure that we have elected officials that are going to defend places like Scott Air Force Base. They're going to make sure we have the best military in the world. The best military in the world ensures that we don't have to go out and overreach in foreign policy. People don't want to mess with America when they know that we're strong. Right now, that's a real problem we have. Our friends don't know if we're going to back them up. Our enemies don't know if we're going to strike back. We need a strong foreign policy. We need a strong military, and that strong military starts in the House of Representatives. Make sure that we fully fund our military and that our men and women aren't on the chopping block because partisan politicians won't make tough decisions. We see what's happening right now with sequestration. If sequestration takes hold, it will only happen because Republicans and Democrats wouldn't agree to work together. Sequestration would result in the smallest standing army since World War II, the smallest standing Navy since World War I, and the smallest strike fighter force in the history of the United States. Our president hasn't offered leadership on sequestration. The members of the Senate and the members of the House haven't offered leadership on sequestration. We need folks that will go to Washington, D.C., that will fight for our national defense policies, will fight for Scott Air Force Base, and will offer leadership in national defense.
Thank you. The next response is from Paula Bradshaw.
Our military spending has doubled in the last 10 years. The wars that the various presidents have launched on peoples of the rest of the world have cost $1.8 trillion. With $1.8 trillion spent on killing people in other countries, we could have given $54 million to every unemployed person in the United States. I don't think that's a wise use of our resources. And also it's contributing to the federal deficit that everybody says they care so much about. You have a tax cut and then you start 2 new wars. How do you not think that you're going to get deeply, deeply into debt? You can't do it. If you want to cut the deficit, you have to stop the wars. As far as Scott Air Force Base goes, you know, we do need a strong defense. We just don't need an empire. We need Scott Air Force Base, but we don't need 900 bases all over the world intimidating other people. And Libya, last year, the United States bombed the heck out of Libya, dropped something like 30,000 bombs on them. At the same time that we had the deficit thing, the holdup in Congress. We were all worried about what kind of cuts we're going to make for child care and food stamps while we're dropping expensive bombs on people in Libya, which was very unconstitutional, by the way. There was no war declared. There was no Congress involved in that. Plus, in Libya, the United States fought side by side with al-Qaeda. They admitted it. They said, but these guys have been reformed. They're good al-Qaeda now. And now we see maybe they weren't so reformed with the blowback that we see in the last couple of weeks in Libya. So I think that we should quit dropping bombs on goat herders in Yemen because they're al-Qaeda and then fighting side by side with al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria.
Response from Bill Enyart.
With all due respect to the other 2 candidates on stage, there's one candidate on stage who can make a serious claim to having serious defense credentials. I've served as the commanding general of the Illinois National Guard for 5 years. I rose to the rank of 2-star general. I served on the Armed Forces Reserve Policy Board, directly advising the Secretary of the Army on national defense policy. I commanded 10,000 Army and 3,000 Air, more than 2,000 of them full-time. During that period of time, we fought the flood of '08, we fought the flood of '11, we fought blizzards. We made the largest single deployment to Afghanistan since World War II. I was the guy who signed the orders, sending your sons and daughters, your brothers and sisters into combat. That's an awesome responsibility. I took that responsibility very seriously. And when I go to Congress, you can count on the fact that I will take my responsibilities as a congressman very seriously. I'm glad that Mr. Plummer serves at Scott Air Force Base as a lieutenant junior grade. Among the people that I commanded were the 1,000 men and women of the 126th Air Refueling Wing at Scott Air Force Base. And in due deference to Ms. Bradshaw, those were my planes and my crews that launched out of Scott Air Force Base to go to Spain to refuel the fighter planes flying over Libya. Because our country has the resources and the ability to do that. Because we do have a strong defense. Because we do spend money on defense as necessary. But I believe that there is money that's wasted, and as a general, I know how to find it. I'm not afraid to grill a general in a congressional hearing and find out where they're wasting money and trim that waste. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Beth Hunsdorfer of the Belleville News-Democrat for Paula Bradshaw.
Candidate Bradshaw, if you've driven on Interstate 57 or Illinois 13 recently, you've seen the big role that transportation is playing in job creation in Southern Illinois. The man you hope to succeed, Congressman Jerry Costello, has worked to bring roads, bridges, airport projects, and other transportation improvements back to his district. As a member of Congress, what transportation projects do you see as the most critical for the region? What specifically would you do to leverage jobs potential of the air transportation at Scott Air Force Base, Mid-America Airport, the Southern Illinois Airport, and the Williamson County Regional Airport?
Well, I find it interesting that you are so focused on airports when, as a Green, I would be much more interested in sustainable transportation, which would be much more focused on rail than air or even, trucks, even highway transportation. That's a massive waste of fossil fuels, and I think that part of my green transportation bill will be to encourage a return to the kind of sustainable transportation that we had before we started blowing the oil that this country had for 100 years. That would include river transportation, train transportation, and as far as personal transportation, that I would support, instead of spending $50 billion a year on fossil fuels and $50 billion a year on road building, which are temporary jobs, let's face it. Yeah, you see the guys out there with the orange cones, and they're busily working, and they're making good money, but it's going to be over soon. Sustainable jobs means that the jobs last for longer than a year or two, and that, the kind of, say, bringing back the light rail that was ripped out of Southern Illinois a few decades, or many decades ago, if you brought back the light rail, not only would it provide construction jobs, but it also would provide ongoing jobs and driving the trolleys and things like that, the kind of jobs that pay well and last and contribute to the bettering of our society and our environment. In other words, why force every person to have a personal fossil fuel-driven vehicle by spending more on highways than you do on light rail or public transportation or other forms of sustainable transportation?
Next response is from Bill Enyart.
Thank you. I intend to follow in the footsteps of Jerry Costello. I think Jerry Costello has done an outstanding job serving on the Transportation Committee and bringing transportation infrastructure to Southern Illinois. I met a couple of weeks ago with Mayor Chesley up in Mount Vernon. And Mayor Chesley, in spite of all the doom and gloom that Mr. Plummer will talk to you about, Mayor Chesley told me that in the Mount Vernon area, between 2011 and 2013, they're going to add 1,200 new jobs. Now, why is that? They're adding 1,200 new jobs because there are 3 new coal mines opening up there, in spite of what he says. She will also tell you that those new jobs are coming because of transportation infrastructure. Mount Vernon sits at the crossroads of I-57 and I-64, and there are 3 Class A rail lines there. That infrastructure is what is building that boom there. If you go to Granite City, the port district at Granite City, if you go to Dupo, if you go to Sauget, the port districts there are booming. Why are they booming? Why are there jobs being added there? If you go to the warehousing district just west of Edwardsville, right at the intersection of 270 and 255, what do you see? There are going to be 1,500 new jobs there. Why? Because of transportation infrastructure. It's critical to the development of this district, and I intend to work very diligently to bring that home for the district. I believe that we need to have, and this is part of my jobs plan, you can see it on my website, I believe that we need to have an infrastructure bank, a bank that creates public-private partnerships it's had bipartisan support, but it's unfortunately never been passed. I believe we need to have Build America bonds that allow state and local government to issue at a discounted rate for important infrastructure products.
Jason Plummer.
I think when there's a problem, in order to solve the problem, the first thing you have to do is admit there's a problem. Bill, we're losing jobs. Every county in this district has seen its unemployment rate go up for the last 4 months. The state of Illinois just saw its unemployment rate go up 0.5%. People don't find it humorous when you gloss over their struggles. People don't find it humorous when you won't admit they're hurting. I know people in Southern Illinois are hurting. The way we turn that around is we admit they're hurting and we talk about policy. I'm here to talk about policy. I said earlier, one of my #1 goals in Washington, one of the #1 things I focus on are what are the core functions of government. #1 core function of government, national defense. #2, the infrastructure of this great nation. Southern Illinois is tremendously blessed with our geographic location. our access to roads, our access to rail, our access to river traffic that gets our farmers' products, our coal miners' products, our manufacturers' products out into the global marketplace. That infrastructure is crumbling right now. That infrastructure is crumbling right now because Southern Illinois has long been neglected. We need someone that's not going to just represent St. Clair County or Belleville, Illinois. We need someone that's going to represent all 12 counties of this district. Someone that understands that it's important for our farmers and our coal miners to get their product through Chester to the river. But they can't do that when the roads of Chester are crumbling. We need to make sure those roads are repaired. There's only one Republican from Illinois on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and he's retiring. The Republicans are going to be in control of the majority of the House after November. I look forward to going to Washington. I'm going to fight tooth and nail to get on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee so that we can make sure those funds come to Southern Illinois, so that we can make sure that we rebuild our levees and we rebuild our locks and dams, so that we rebuild our rail network and our road network, so that our small businessmen and our farmers and our coal miners can get their product out there, so we can expand our economy, and so that we can actually bring real substantive jobs to the families of Southern Illinois.
At this point in our event, we'd like to give each of the candidates 2 minutes to rebut anything that you think needs to be addressed at this point that's been said by the other candidates. We're going to start the rebuttals with Paula Bradshaw.
Oh gosh, I wasn't prepared for this. I'm sorry. I guess that I would just say when you talked, Bill, when you directed the question to me, saying that you were the one that went over and bombed Libya as defense of this country, they didn't even pretend that Libya was a threat to this country. I mean, they didn't even give us that usual excuse of weapons of mass destruction, or they're going to come over here in their little speedboats and ram our coast. I mean, they didn't even bother saying any of the usual. What they said was they were protecting the people. So to call the bombing of Libya a defense of this country is really, really a stretch. That was just pure imperial overreach. It was illegal, and it was wrong. That's what I said.
Rebuttal from Mr. Enyart.
Thank you. Jason, there were 10,000 new jobs added in the state of Illinois last month. The reason the unemployment rate went back up is because people who are long-term unemployed are now out looking for work because they have hope of getting a job. And, you know, for some reason, Mr. Plummer wants people to be afraid, and Mr. Plummer wants people to be depressed. I'm sorry, I'm not going to take that kind of attitude. Now, also, Mr. Plummer says he's going to solve the deficit by eliminating tax deductions. Which ones will you eliminate, Jason? Are you going to eliminate the home mortgage interest? Are you going to eliminate the deduction for health insurance? You know, we hear these generalities, but let's hear some detail. Let's hear a plan. The $720 billion he claims that President Obama, and for some reason, he wants to run against Barack Obama. You know, he doesn't want to run against Bill Enyart. I'm not quite sure why, but he wants to run against Nancy Pelosi. If he wants to run against Nancy Pelosi, he needs to rent a villa in San Francisco, not in O'Fallon. He claims that I am out of touch and I don't understand what it's like to be unemployed. I'm going to tell you something. I've had to draw an unemployment check. You know, I've got an uncle who's a retired coal miner in Sparta, Illinois, and he had to draw unemployment because he got laid off from the mines. I know what it's like because I grew up working class and having to struggle to get to where I am today. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Now, Mr. Plummer talks about class warfare. You're right. There is class warfare, and sorry I'm going to sound like Paula Bradshaw here for a minute, but you know what? The class warfare has been going on for 10 years. George Bush cut taxes for millionaires, got us into 2 wars, and that's why we're in the deficit, the critical deficit situation we're in today. The large Wall Street banks, he got a donation from Goldman Sachs.
Okay.
I didn't.
Time. Mr. Plummer.
If you look at what's happening right now, it's quite fascinating. My comments are focused on the people of Southern Illinois. Bill Enyart likes to talk about me. I'm more than happy to talk about me. You say I'm an inherited millionaire. I look out in the audience. My grandparents have passed. They were people of very simple means. I see my parents out there, breathing. I'm not sure what I could have inherited from them. My family grew up in Litchfield, Illinois. My dad didn't have running water or electricity. He got to college because he went there on a sports scholarship. He met my mom there, they became teachers. They taught high school, they coached sports. Then he decided he wanted to do something that most Americans dream of and most Americans try. He wanted to start his own business. He started that business. He now employs over 1,000 people. Bob Plummer and his employees built that business. Barack Obama didn't build that business. The United States government didn't build that business. I'm proud to admit my family employs a lot of people, a lot of good, hard-working people. We wish we could employ more people in Southern Illinois. But the failed policies that Bill Enyart supports keeps us from being able to do that. You know, I'm standing here right now. I'm a businessman. I'm proud of that. I hope to keep growing jobs. Bill, this entire campaign, has yet to admit what he does for a living. He's a trial lawyer. He's a trial lawyer from St. Clair County, Illinois. You want to know why our healthcare system struggles? You want to know why small businesses leave Southern Illinois? It's because of lawsuits, and it's because of public policy from people like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama that Bill Enyart supports. If we're going to...
Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Let him finish.
If we're going to make sure we represent Southern Illinois, we have to admit there's a problem. I know there's a problem in Southern Illinois. The people in Southern Illinois knows there's a problem in Southern Illinois.
Time.
And we're going to work together to solve those problems.
We should let the audience debate. You're doing a good job out there. I want to go back to the panelists now for some questions. Each candidate has, again, 2 minutes to answer. Next question comes from Gary Metro for Jason Plummer.
Mr. Plummer, this question comes from numerous readers of the Southern Illinoisan and also people in the audience tonight who had the same question. As we grapple for answers to our nation's never-quenched thirst for energy, some people are looking at natural gas as a very abundant source of clean fuel. But there are concerns about one method being used to access the gas, hydraulic fracturing, or fracking as it is commonly known. Illinois, especially Southern Illinois, is seen as a potential source of natural gas that would be recovered through fracking. We also are a region at considerable risk of a cataclysmic earthquake, and there are concerns about contaminating our water through fracking. Where do you stand on fracking?
I support accessing all of our natural resources. The economy of Southern Illinois is built by the coal industry, the ag industry, the oil and gas industry. That's where our people find work. When you flip on a light switch, you thank a coal miner. When you turn on your lights, when you get that utility bill, when it's low, you thank the folks of Southern Illinois. When it's high, you realize the people of Southern Illinois aren't working in the coal mines. They're not accessing our natural gas. They're not accessing the oil that we've been blessed with. I support fracturing for oil. I know Senator John O. Jones from Mount Vernon, Illinois. He's been in the business. He's fracked over 500 wells and never had a problem. There's nobody on this stage that wants to harm the environment. There's nobody in the audience that wants to harm the environment. What we do want to make sure we do is in a safe, thoughtful manner, we access our natural resources. We put our men and women back to work in the coal industry, the oil industry, the gas industry. Those resources aren't just jobs in Southern Illinois. They're lower utility bills for people around this nation. They're opportunity for our children when they graduate high school, or a 2-year college, or a 4-year university, when they come back from the military. 20 years ago, we had 37 operating coal mines. Today, we don't have 10. We see what's happening in Pennsylvania and Ohio and the Dakotas, where the unemployment rate's 4%, slightly better than our 10.5% in Illinois, in the 12th Congressional District. We know that we could bring down our unemployment rate. We know we could access those resources in a safe manner. And when I go to Washington, D.C., I'm going to make sure that absolutely every single person in Southern Illinois that wants to work in the oil fields, wants to work in the natural gas industry, that wants to be in the coal mines, has the opportunity to be there, and they can provide for their families.
Paula Bradshaw is next.
Well, I'm a member of the Green Party, so of course I'm against fracking. Fracking uses water. Fracking takes vast amounts of clean, drinkable water, pumps it full of chemicals, and then forces it under the ground to fracture the rocks so that the gas and other harmful chemicals can escape, be sold for profit for the energy companies. And you talk a lot about creating jobs with fracking. Of course, fracking won't create jobs for people in southern Illinois, except for peripherally. They will bring people in that know how to frack from the rest of the country, and those people will get the jobs. What natural gas, coal, and oil are fossil fuels. They are the millions and millions of years of ancient sunlight compressed into compact sources of energy. And we have had quite a run since oil was discovered in the United States in 1859. We built a whole industrial economy on cheap fossil fuels. And of course, no one wants to admit that those days of cheap, easily accessible fossil fuels are over, but you can see that they are. You can see because if you had gushers still in Texas, you wouldn't be drilling in the Gulf of Mexico and the oil spills. You wouldn't be blowing up the mountaintops in Appalachia. You wouldn't be fracturing miles underneath the ground. Just people, it's time to grow up and realize that it's time to turn to renewable energy, the kind of energy that will be here for centuries to come, and quit acting like addicts, ripping apart the couch, looking for the last bits, looking for a nickel so they can get their high. That's what we're doing. We're ripping up our atmosphere, we're ripping up our mountains, we're ripping up our land, our water, our topsoil to get the last bits of fossil fuel. Grow up.
Response from Bill Enyart.
Thank you. This nation needs a sound, strategic, long-term energy plan, a long-term energy policy. We don't have that. What we have is an ad hoc, thrown together, fill-the-gap energy policy. We need to evaluate all of our natural resources, all of our energy sources, and we need to incorporate all of them. A critical segment of that, of course, is coal. And we must end our dependence on foreign oil, which we've come a very, very long way towards doing that. Now, fracking is here. Fracking is happening. It's happening around the globe. And it's driving natural gas prices down, which is good for the consumer. It's bad for the coal industry. Mr. Plummer won't tell you this, but one of the reasons that the coal industry is in trouble is because natural gas prices are so cheap. And we need to evaluate all of our sources of energy and build them into a sound, long-term strategic national plan. That's what needs to happen. Now, what concerns me greatly also is Mr. Plummer has countless times said we need to do away with regulations. We have to get regulations off the back of business. Now, I have read about fracking, and fracking is very, very safe as long as you do it right, as long as you properly put the pipes in the ground and do all of those things. But what happens when you get corporations? Remember Massey Coal in West Virginia? Yeah, what happened in Massey Coal? All those coal miners died because the coal mines sought profits over safety. So we cannot allow fracking to go on without proper regulation and oversight.
Jennifer Fuller has a question for Paula Bradshaw.
The last question touched on this a bit, but I'd like some more specifics when it comes to green energy in the 12th Congressional District. Are we heading in the right direction in pursuing existing green technologies, or would we be better served by funding research and development of newer green technologies and withholding major capital investments until we have more options? And if you could be specific on what types of energies you would support.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the sentence before the last part.
Are we headed in the right direction by pursuing existing green technologies, Or would we be better served by funding research and development of newer green technologies and withholding major capital investment until we have more options?
Oh, withholding, okay, I didn't hear what you said, sorry. No, we already have proven technologies. Wind and solar have, already wind is supplying 4% of the energy in this country, and that's with massive subsidies to the fossil fuel industry and very, very little to wind or solar. We need to flip that around. We need to know that continuing to subsidize fossil fuel companies, oil companies who already make record profits, why do they need our tax money? Take that money and use it to pay for wind and solar projects, to use the power of the federal government, for instance, like the Paul Simon building has solar panels on it. Every federal building should have some sort of renewable energy supplying it. The federal government is a big, big money spender, and it should spend the money on the right things. And that would help these businesses that are making these products, and that would just bring more and more jobs in wind and solar, for instance. Now, as far as investing in other green technologies, yeah, I'm all for that. That's where we should be directing our research dollars, not into how, coal sequestering or whatever the boondoggles of the day are. We should be definitely investing in new technology and research to see how we can completely transition off of carbon-based fuels without going to something very, very dangerous like nuclear. We need to have just renewable that will be here in the decades to come, the centuries to come, and not blow up our biosphere for, a couple decades of fossil fuels. So both is the answer.
Response from Bill Enyart.
Well, I think we certainly need to continue research and development. My alma mater, Southern Illinois University. Gary, that's a shameless plug after your fine examples of endorsing the Southern Illinois in there. Southern Illinois University has a great coal research facility. And by increasing resources in research and development, that's what drives the cost of technology down. If we look at the Prairie State Energy Campus, they've got the greatest scrubbing technology, and in fact, that points out my earlier point on infrastructure. Because of the infrastructure buildup on the Kaskaskia River and the ability to ship coal and ship fuel and ship the scrubbers in and out of that facility. But by increasing research and development and doing it in conjunction with a sound, long-term, sound energy policy, a national level energy policy, we'll be able to drive that technology and drive those technology costs down. What's the cheapest way to cut your gas bill in half? Cheapest way to cut your gas bill in half is double your fuel mileage. And we've seen that happening. And the auto companies screamed about it. They screamed about unnecessary government intervention, didn't they? Don't you all remember that? They were screaming when the fuel standards got increased? Well, guess what? When I was a young kid driving a hot rod, if you got 12 or 14 miles to the gallon, you were great. And now you can go buy a new Mustang and you get 30 miles to the gallon with it. So by increasing use of technology, we can certainly aid our energy problem and solve some of the problems that Ms. Bradshaw is so concerned about.
Mr. Plummer.
What we need in the United States is an all-of-the-above energy policy. We need
That's
to make
enough.
sure.
Please continue.
What we need in the United States of America is an all-of-the-above energy policy. We need an energy policy that embraces all the resources we've been blessed with, as well as technologies that have been discovered. I'm all for wind, I'm all for solar, I'm all for nuclear power. I know Southern Illinois is tremendously blessed with oil, gas, and coal. We need to access those resources as well. What we don't need is a federal government that picks winners and losers. We talked about solar panels on top of the Paul Simon building here in Carbondale. We just invested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And when I say we, I mean every taxpayer sitting in this crowd right now, in a thing called Solyndra. That went bankrupt because government doesn't know what it's doing. Guess where those solar panels sitting in Carbondale were manufactured? China, not the United States. We need an energy policy that embraces our technologies, embraces our workers, embraces our resources. We need to make sure we utilize them. I know 42% of the power in this country is made by coal. I know that the coal industry, coal prices, natural gas prices are very cyclical. Everyone in this crowd right now should be grateful for the fact that natural gas prices are low. Because if natural gas prices weren't low right now, and we continued this war on coal that we see from Washington, D.C., your utility bills would be going through the roof. We have to embrace our resources. I want to make sure that when I go to Washington, D.C., we are investing tremendous amounts of money in oil and gas and coal and making sure that we nurture new technologies so that we can wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. But we're not going to be able to do that overnight. The people of Southern Illinois realize we're not going to be able to do that overnight. And until we get those things figured out, we need to focus on the resources that we're blessed with and the resources that manufacture and provide the vast majority of energy in the United States. That's oil, gas, and most importantly, Southern Illinois coal.
Up next, Beth Hunsdorfer for candidate Bill Enyart.
Candidate Enyart, Governor Pat Quinn wants to shut down the TAM Supermax prison in Southern Illinois because of budget constraints. Would you support the federal government stepping in to buy the facility to keep those corrections jobs in the area?
I think that the closure of TAMs by the state government is the absolute wrong thing to do. And I have stated that, and I have told the governor that. The impact, the economic impact of closing TAMs is far heavier in Southern Illinois than it would be if he were to close an equivalent facility in Chicago, simply because of the size of the population. You know, the economy in Union County and Alexander County and Randolph County can't absorb that blow the way that Cook County could. An additional factor to be considered in closing TAMs is that those are some of the most dangerous prisoners in the system. And by taking them out of TAMs and putting them into other prison facilities, into other Department of Correction facilities, they're endangering not only guards but other prisoners. So I think that that's absolutely the wrong thing to do on the part of the state of Illinois to close that facility. I would certainly support the federal government looking at TAMs to see what use might be made of it. Frankly, I'm no expert on federal penitentiaries. I doubt that anyone standing up here is, but I would certainly encourage the Federal Bureau of Prisons to take a look at it and see if it might conceivably be utilized by the federal government.
Jason Plummer.
You know, there's a war that's been going on in Southern Illinois for a long time. It's being waged by the folks out of Chicago who control Springfield, Illinois right now. I think a lot of people in this room, I know I have, I've seen what's happening. I realize the impact that their policies are having on Southern Illinois. It's not just TAMs, it's the youth center in Murfreesboro, it's the rehabilitation center in Carbondale. These provide very important functions in our society. They provide some very, very important jobs, well-paying, quality jobs for hundreds of Southern Illinoisans. You know, I've been fighting these folks from Chicago and these folks from Springfield for a while now. I wish Bill would have had the foresight I had, and instead of donating money to Rod Blagojevich and Pat Quinn, I wish he would have voted against them, voted against their policies that destroy Southern Illinois. TAM shutting down is catastrophic. Murfreesboro and Carbondale shutting down is catastrophic. In terms of federal ideas, I think that's something that needs to be looked at, but what I'd really like to see serious leadership in Springfield that would put the men and women that protect all Illinois citizens back to work in these facilities. I know the money's been made available in the budget. I know you're good friends with Pat Quinn. Perhaps you could pull some strings and see if he'd utilize that money to put the men and women in Southern Illinois back to work. Alexander County has a 13.5% unemployment rate. Next door, Pulaski County has a 12.5% unemployment rate. Those are jobs that are about to leave. That's opportunity that's about to leave. Those communities, those counties, those families, they can't absorb another blow. We need politicians that aren't going to speak out of both sides of their mouth. We need politicians that are going to stand up for Southern Illinois. We need politicians that are going to fight for the policies that will protect the jobs in Southern Illinois. I know I'm the candidate that's been standing up for all those members of AFSCME that work at those prisons. I know I'm the candidate that's been meeting at those facilities, talking about the issues that are impacting those facilities. And I know when I'm elected, I'm not going to kowtow to the folks from Chicago. I'm going to stand up to Chicago and fight for Southern Illinois.
Now, this group is a very studious bunch, and you've done your homework. You submitted questions in advance, and we have... Oh, I'm sorry. Paula, I'm sorry. My apology. I've jumped the gun.
Pot of plan over here. Okay. I question the need for so many prisons. We went from 2 prisons in Southern Illinois in 1982, 14 prisons in Southern Illinois now. You could look at that as a job creator, or you could look at it as a failure of public policy. What is it in this land of the free that makes it so necessary to lock up so many people? For instance, the war on drugs started about the same time. Coincidence? I think not. The war on drugs means that a whole lot of those people in those prisons are there for nonviolent crimes, are there for doing something that people have done for millions of years when no government was there to lock them up. So I think that we should rethink our drug policy, which not only is waging war on the people of America, but the wars on people in Colombia and Mexico, with 50,000 people dead in Mexico in the last few years because of the war on drugs. Almost every South American, Central American, Mexican president is now saying, you guys have got to get a hold of yourselves and do something to decriminalize marijuana and quit waging war on the peoples of other countries and also on the people of this country. With the Green New Deal, we will have jobs for everybody that are socially uplifting jobs and not jobs, guarding unemployed people. From Chicago, you have unemployed farmers guarding unemployed people, factory workers from Chicago is basically what it is. So I don't see how you can call yourself the land of the free when we have more people in prison here in the United States than any other country on the world. And I really think that we need to find better ways of employing our people rather than locking up our fellow citizens.
And if you're keeping score, Paula, that's 2 strikes against me.
What'd you say?
All right. As I said, this is a very studious bunch, and you've done your homework. And I've got some questions for the candidates. This is kind of a lightning round. We're going to go 30 seconds each on the answers, so keep it brief. First question goes to Jason Plummer. With many community colleges and some universities in this district, what are you going to do to help college students make it in life?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is when they graduate, I'm going to make sure there's a job waiting for them. The youth unemployment rate we see right now in this nation, in this state, is catastrophic. It's tragic. When our children graduate from John A. Logan Community College or Wren Lake or Southwestern Illinois College or Shawnee College down in Pulaski County, they have the tools necessary to go out in the workforce and provide for their families. Unfortunately, the jobs aren't there for them. The first thing we can do, the most important thing we can do to make sure our young folks can provide for their families and have an opportunity is make sure there's a job waiting for them.
Thanks very much. Paula Bradshaw.
Well, college was very affordable in this country throughout the 60s and 70s, and I would say that as a decent society, educating our children should be one of our top priorities. So I would say we should fully fund our schools and universities and make sure that our students don't have a big old debt when they get out into the real world, and that there are jobs waiting for them with the Green New Deal, not coal mining.
Bill Enyart.
Thank you. What I believe we do is we must develop our infrastructures so that we can have economic development in this district. In addition to developing economic infrastructure, physical infrastructure, what we have to develop is what I call people infrastructure. Jason Plummer has endorsed Paul Ryan's plan, which slashes student loans and slashes Pell Grants. That is not the right thing to do. I've had a student loan. I paid my student loan back. I know what it's like to be somebody who needs a student loan to get through college.
Second question we'll start with Paula Bradshaw. Where do you stand on same-sex marriage and/or civil unions?
Well, I think that same-sex marriage would be the way to go. You know, you have okay, number one. I don't think that churches should be forced to marry people if they don't want to. Right now, you have churches that will marry same-sex couples. That's different from the government support of marriage that we have. The government support of marriage that we have should be open to everybody, and whether or not they're same-sex couples or alternate or opposing sex couples or opposite-sex couples. You know.
Thank you.
So
Bill Enyart.
I support the same-sex marriage act.
Bill Enyart.
Well, I would be opposed to same-sex marriage. I differ from the Democratic Party on that. Now, let me say that that's the first time since I've been campaigning I've been asked that question. That's not a real concern in the district. What I've been asked about are jobs and Medicare and Social Security. That's what people are concerned about, are economic issues, not these divisive wedge social issues that the Republicans love to throw up there. Let's instead talk about the real issues, and that is jobs, the slashing of Medicare and Social Security by Paul Ryan's budget, endorsed by Mr. Plummer.
Mr. Plummer.
I support traditional marriage. You know, I think the voters out there want to make sure that the person they're talking to, the person they're going to vote for, is an honest person. Bill and I have had several conversations, so let me repeat this in front of everybody. I have never endorsed Paul Ryan's budget. I do not support Paul Ryan's budget. And if you say that again, you're being dishonest to the people of Southern Illinois. And if you're... And as I said before, if you're going to be honest with...
All right.
If you're going to...
One at a time.
If you're...
Right.
If
Moving
you're
on
going
to
to
the-
if you're
moving
going
on
to
to
be
the next
dishonest with the
question.
voters of Southern Illinois when you're asking for their vote, what are you going to do when you're their congressman?
All right. Moving on to the next question. What will you do to oppose continuing efforts by the President to pass cap-and-trade taxes under which he has promised skyrocketing energy prices and other regulations which he says will destroy our coal industry in Southern Illinois as well as make American products uncompetitive globally? Mr. Enyart, your response.
You know, I'm glad you asked that question. I'll be opposed to that. And let me tell you that we have Mr. Plummer on tape, June 12th, Alton, Illinois, Town Hall, fully embracing the Paul Ryan budget. I don't care what he says. Now, let me tell you something.
Let him talk.
As an officer,
Let him talk.
I swore an oath as an officer. My honor is very important to me, and I don't have to lie, unlike Mr. Paul Ryan or Mr. Plummer, for that matter. So let's just keep it on the up and up here, Mr. Plummer. Thank you.
For Paula Bradshaw.
I think cap and trade is a horrible way to deal with our climate problems. You do not turn over the fate of our ecosystem to Wall Street. We know that Wall Street gambles. Okay. We know that Wall Street doesn't care about anything but making money. And we know that since Kyoto, the rest of the world has done a cap and trade system, and all it's led to is higher carbon emissions in the last 12 years, so clearly it doesn't even work. I would definitely be opposed to turning our environment over to cap and trade.
Thanks very much. Mr. Plummer.
Well, if you're going to oppose cap and trade, you have to stand up to regulatory overreach. We have an EPA that wants to regulate how much dust a combine kicks up. We've got a Department of Labor that wants to regulate whether or not 15-year-old kids can work on a family farm. I oppose cap and trade, and I oppose people who support cap and trade. As the Illinois Coal Association said at the coal rally in Franklin County last Saturday, if you support the current administration, you don't support coal in Southern Illinois.
All right. We've come to the end of the questioning. It's time for closing statements. The candidates will each make a 2-minute closing statement. Paula Bradshaw will go first.
I'm sure most of you have played the game of Monopoly, which first became popular during the last Great Depression. We know that at some point in the game, one person inevitably controls all the property and the money, cackling as they collect more and more money from those who land on their spaces. Unfortunately for us, our country today strongly resembles a game of Monopoly, except it's a rigged game in which the bankers get to play the game with all of the money. This new player, call it Wall Street, not only owns Boardwalk and Park Place, but Pennsylvania Avenue, and a nearby property called Capitol Hill, and they've rewritten the rules to benefit them. They have taken the power to put common people directly in jail for trivial offenses while they get an unlimited supply of get-out-of-jail-free cards. They're taking the houses of people on Baltic Avenue through fraud and perjury. They're trying to make it so no ordinary player can collect $200 when we pass go. They have robbed millions of the opportunity to earn any money and jack up the price whenever we land on the electric company by keeping us addicted to ever more costly fossil fuels. They are trying to privatize the water company. They've replaced most of the railroads with expensive gas-guzzling cars. They lend us money but charge predatory interest rates as part of the bargain. They even threaten people who prefer to play parcheesi. It's time to reset the game. We need people in Congress who will make sure that fair rules are made and followed, who will protect public property, who will make sure that the top 1% are taxed fairly, that money is distributed fairly, that everyone has an opportunity to continue playing and earn a decent living, and who respects the rights of people in other countries to go their own way. Our economy should not be an institution in which a privileged few are allowed to game the system. In fact, it shouldn't be a game at all. The economy affects how we live and our quality of life. We need to rein in those who are manipulating the system and institute new rules that give every child born in America an equal and fair chance to thrive. That is what I will do my best to do to create if elected as your next representative.
Thank you very much. Bill Enyart.
Thank you. You know, you've heard serious policy differences between the three of us. Mr. Plummer, for example, would subsidize energy companies like Exxon, which made billions and billions of dollars. I'd like to point out also, I talked about tax fairness when we opened this up. Mr. Plummer would continue tax breaks for millionaires. He wants to write tax policy, but he won't tell you what his interest in that tax policy is. Mr. Plummer, when will you release your tax returns? When are you going to show us what percentage you pay? Now, let me finish. Now, let's talk about Medicare. Let's talk about Medicare and Social Security. You know, when he states that Barack Obama, who he wants to run against, slashed $720 billion, that is an absolute misrepresentation. It's a hold down in the growth, and the Wall Street Journal says that there's a 30% inefficiency in the hospital care system. It's a hold down in growth in hospital bills. It's not taking money out of senior citizens. Also, Paul Ryan relies on that same $720 billion in his budget, which Mr. Plummer endorsed. Now, let's talk about the fact of jobs. You know, he talks about jobs. I have a clear, achievable jobs plan. Mr. Plummer has got some 12-point plan, which he hasn't bothered to release all of yet. I think he's on about point 5. You know, there's serious differences in work experience, in professional experience, in leadership experience. I'm glad to hear him talk about leadership. Let's compare lieutenant junior grade to major general. Is that a bit of...
Let him finish.
I've led 13,000 Army and Air National Guardsmen and run a $650 million budget for the last 5 years through floods, blizzards, and the largest combat deployment since World War II.
Jason Plummer, your closing statement.
We do have serious policy differences. We've got people on this stage that have a very different view of Southern Illinois and a very different view of where they want to take Southern Illinois. I've talked with people in all 12 counties. We've done meet and greets, we've done town halls, we've talked with farmers and coal miners, doctors and nurses, teachers, police officers, firefighters, and everybody says the same thing. They said, what are we going to do about the federal government? My number one goal when I go to Washington, D.C., is to shrink the size and scope of the federal government. When you shrink the size and scope of the federal government, you won't worry about your Second Amendment rights being infringed upon. You won't worry about the government getting in the way of tough medical decisions. It should be family choices. You don't have to worry about out-of-control spending. You don't have to control about trillion-dollar deficits. We need people that are going to talk about substantive issues and substantive answers. Our jobs plan is pretty clear. I encourage everybody to go to our website and look at it. It talks about true tax reform. It talks about reining in and out of control federal government. It talks about the EPA. It talks about the TRAIN Act and the RAINS Act. It talks about making sure we uphold every promise we've made to our seniors. The Congressional Budget Office, it's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's relied upon by the President for facts. The Congressional Budget Office says that Obamacare cut $720 billion from Medicare. The Wall Street Journal, which my opponent just referenced, says that Obamacare cuts $720 billion from Medicare. I'm here to make sure we uphold every promise we've made to our seniors. I'm here to make sure that when our children graduate from local high schools or local community colleges or four-year universities, or when they come back from the military, they have an opportunity to find jobs. You're not serious about jobs in Southern Illinois. You're not serious about representing the values of Southern Illinoisans unless you're willing to admit that we have a problem in Southern Illinois. The problem is simple. Washington, D.C. has been taking it to Southern Illinois for far too long. I'm going to Washington, D.C. to take Southern Illinois and common sense values there.
All right. Thanks very much. We have come to, sir, that's enough. We have come to the end of our debate, our second debate for the 2012 general election. I want to thank the candidates, Paula Bradshaw, Bill Enyart, and Jason Plummer. We also want to thank our panelists, Gary Metro of the Southern Illinoisan, Jennifer Fuller of WSIU Radio, and Beth Hunsdorfer of the Belleville News-Democrat. Thanks also to the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute at SIU Carbondale and the staff of the Marion Cultural and Civic Center. The candidates will debate one more time this election season. That third and final debate will be on Wednesday, October 10th at 7 p.m. at Lindenwood University in Belleville. The debate will be streamed live at thesouthern.com and Belleville News Democrat, BND.com. The debate will air on WSIU television on October 12th. That's a Friday at 7 p.m. The Belleville debate is open to the public. And we want to thank you tonight for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Good night from Marion.